Welcome back to the V.T.P. Let's keep on going and take a trip to a whole new continent with the debut of Generation 5.
While Generation 5 did not see a hardware change for the franchise, it did usher in a whole new era in the way that stories were told and interacted with. Taking a new approach in how we, the player character, play a role in the story, Generation 5 sets us in the Unova region with a massive new world to explore, though a large part of it would not be accessible at the onset of Black and White. Here, as we the player are tasked with getting through the Unova League while fighting off the forces of Team Plasma, led at first by an N, and then in turn his adoptive father Gitsis, as we explore the different motivations for getting people to release their Pokémon and liberate them all into the wild. This narrative put a bit of a twist into the mixture to learn that N was merely a victim of his adopted father's brainwashing, and in turn then see how it all plays out in the sequel games of Black 2 and White 2. With a massive number of new Pokémon to examine and capture, a flowing narrative that connects over the span of years with many changes and developments over time, and a story that truly sets it apart from others, it can be said that the Unova region was the last true region to shine brilliantly on the Nintendo DS, and it went out with a bang! New World Syndrome. One of the most important and interesting attributes that helped to define the way that Black and White were played was the way that the Pokédex was actually constructed. In essence, the beginning of Generation 5 was meant to be akin to restarting the series by only providing players 156 new Pokémon to catch and train in the games initially, before they complete the main story campaign. As such, it was very much like a reboot of the first generation, meant to symbolize a new, fresh start for the series. It is only in the post-game where Pokémon from other regions finally make an appearance in the wild. This interesting take makes sense in light of the way that Generation 5 was made, as it is a sharp departure from the main stories of previous generations in the way that it handles story complexity and characterization, with a much larger, more complex plot that involves everyone in the region, even the gym leaders pitching in at the end in order to help stop the forces of Team Plasma. This incredible commitment to the story beyond the player's journey made it feel fresh and exciting for many, and helped to usher in an entirely new, fresh experience, while paying homage to Generation 1, where it all started, at the same time. However, this kind of approach to generations did not extend past Generation 5, and in truth, I think that comes down to the real history and purpose of Generation 5. The previous mainline generations had been based on parts of Japan geographically. The Unova region was the first major mainline series region to be based on a place outside of Japan, namely the US, and so this new approach was symbolic in the creation of a new adventure outside the confines of the first 4 generations. However, after this, it became standard for new regions to be based on places outside of Japan, so different story elements could be used for subsequent generations, thus leaving the gimmick of an entirely new Pokédex and nothing but to remain a relic of Generation 5's debut. Pokémon Musical. The Pokémon Musical was the successor to Pokémon Contest in Generation 5, and offered a bit of a unique take on the performance aspect of the system. Instead of competing for ribbons, this event saw players competing with the Pokémon for props with a combination of dress-up and then dancing to see which contestant could have the best aesthetic appearance and rhythm in dancing to make themselves a real showstopper to others. While it is true that trainer cards did require the players to acquire at least 100 different props from both winning musicals and just through chances with NPCs and other sources, the actual strategy needed to win these events was a lot less than contests, and as a result, it didn't have the same sort of engagement and impact as the previous iteration, which might explain why they did not make it past Generation 5. Pokestar Studios. Pokestar Studios was a glamorous little bit of fun within the Unova region attached to Black 2 and White 2 that allowed players to use their Pokémon, and even rental Pokémon, to make all sorts of Pokémon-themed movies that can truly make a Pokémon a star on the silver screen like they were a part of Hollywood. Which makes sense because it was actually based on Hollywood directly. This wasn't just for fun either, as the more movies that were made with varying endings, the more items that players could get from fans, as well as greater recognition from within the studio itself. While this was certainly entertaining and gave us the chance to see classic trainers like Bryce and Sabrina once more, its basis in Hollywood and the Unova region being based off of part of New York meant that the location is likely tied to that part of American culture, and thus didn't have much ground to stand on elsewhere, especially since it was mainly added to diversify Black 2 and White 2's visual aesthetics. Seasons. In addition to the time of day factoring into the way in which the world changes, Generation 5 saw the introduction of seasons, which had an effect not just on the wild Pokémon of the Unova region, but also the terrain in some locations. In essence, a season lasts a month in-game, and it cycles between the 4 in a predictable pattern of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. As the time of day did in previous generations, the season that is currently in play could have an effect on the types of wild Pokemon that could be found in a specific location, such as Cryogonal only being relatively easy to find in the winter at Twist Mountain. Plus it would affect the forms of Deerling and Sawsbuck, but more importantly, could have an effect on the environment, with some places like Twist Mountain having items in areas that are only accessible in the winter, when snow piles up to form ramps and bridges to otherwise inaccessible locations. While this concept was certainly a creative take on the time-based events, the fact that months would have to be spent waiting for a given season to roll out made it a bit of a difficult system to simply wait out, and the time needed for it to happen might be the reason why it wasn't included in further generations. Hidden Grottos. Hidden grottos in the Unova region existed as small hideaways within forested areas where trainers could explore and have the chance to potentially find both rare items and even Pokemon that normally could not be found in the nearby area. Though a small addition to some, time and plenty of walking could help to replenish them with more items and Pokemon, and thus served as a nice little bonus for those with patience and a willingness to explore and hunt for them. Sadly, this feature seems to only be native in the wilds of the Unova region and to not make a big enough impact to be seen more, as hidden grottos have not made a reappearance since the debut generation. Rotation and Triple Battles. Rotation and Triple Battles were the first type of new battle style introduced since the debut of Double Battles in Generation 3, and had their own unique stance in how to conduct battles in more exotic and complex ways. While both of these battle types place a total of 3 Pokemon on each side of the battlefield, rotation battles allow trainers to use one Pokemon at a time only, switching them around before using a move to use whatever Pokemon of the 3 on file one wished to surprise opponents or otherwise try and block attacks to ensure that they do not deal the sort of damage expected against others, helping to cover the weaknesses of team members to make for a more dynamic fight as a whole. With triple battles, on the other hand, the name says it all, as players would place 3 Pokemon on the battlefield at once, and the position they were at would determine which of the 3 opposing Pokemon any single entity could actually target in battle, with Pokemon in the middle being able to target any opponent freely, while those on the sides could not normally target those on the farthest opposing side of the battlefield. While fun and engaging, these sorts of battles do not truly add much to the complexity of battle systems present already, or at least not in a consistent manner, and in turn did not last very long outside of the debut generation, ceasing all appearances after Generation 6. Pokemon World Tournament. Originally constructed by Clay, the gym leader of Driftvale City in the Unova region, as a way to encourage development within his home city, the Pokemon World Tournament was a battle facility that more than made a difference in giving trainers a serious challenge against the best of the best in the world at the time. In essence, players could enter into serious 8-person elimination tournaments against not just NPCs, but against some legendary trainers like gym leaders and champions, in order to prove they were the best of the best in a variety of formats, in turn marking the reappearance of many trainers that had not otherwise been seen in an extremely long time, working as both a huge nostalgia trip and a chance to see if players had what was needed to prove themselves to be worthy of a championship status within the tournament as a whole. While the appearance of many classic trainers here certainly made it a highlight of Black 2 and White 2, the lore that ties it to Driftvale City, as well as the continuing swirl of gym leaders and other major trainers in further generations, sadly made the PWT cumbersome in concept if it were to continue on, thus limiting its scope to the tail end of Generation 5. Medal System. The medal system was introduced in Generation 5 in Black 2 and White 2 as a sort of achievement system that would award players with medals for completing specific tasks and challenges in-game as a way of showing their prowess and completing every aspect of the games as possible. The medals themselves didn't really do much on their own, merely being something to show off to others, but the challenge of completing these tasks could nonetheless make them fun to collect and test to see how good a player could actually be in these games. While the system did continue in Generation 6, it was part of the Pokemon Global Link system at that point, and thus medals were not awarded in-game for completing given tasks. The system itself was fun, but it didn't really add a great deal to the main series, which may have been the cause behind its removal when the Pokemon Global Link the system was attached to was shut down at the onset of Generation 7. Join Avenue. Join Avenue is a unique feature exclusive to Black 2 and White 2, and essentially acts as a customizable shopping center of sorts, where players can mix and match different storefronts in order to make the most of their time in the games with said services. While the location starts out rather small at first, players can interact with other trainers and NPCs in order to slowly grow and develop the location to add many different types of shops that can offer a variety of services to enhance the overall playing experience. While there isn't much of an impact on the main game to be found here, it can still be a fun diversion and gives players the chance to make a home out of it and a welcome place for those looking to pursue different and upgraded shops over time. As fun as it was to build this location, however, its specific geographic location isolated it from other regions and in turn kept it from returning in future games. Entrylink. The Entrylink is a location that existed within the Generation 5 games that was connected to both the past powers used in that generation as well as the Dream World. In essence, it acted as a hub for these locations. The past power system connected to it could allow players to modify their in-game experience in numerous ways to make things more enjoyable and creative, while its access to the Entree Forest would allow players, in turn, to have the chance to capture Pokémon encounter within the Dream World. It further served as a hub for communicating with others and attempting challenges in order to mark progress in the games and add to the Metal system in Black 2 and White 2. Sadly, this feature was directly linked to the products like the Dream World that was shut down with the advent of Generation 6, which in turn resulted in Entrylink being effectively shut down as well. Sea Gear. The Sea Gear served as a replacement for the Pokétech from the previous generation and was created by the scientist Fennel in order to analyze multiple types of data at once to examine the world at a larger scope, and really put to work the system of Wi-Fi that now dominated online functions. Aside from having the X transceiver as a way to communicate directly with others from afar and in-game, it also featured access to the Entrylink and the Dream World, the latter being accessed through the Pokémon Global Link, as well as allowed players to connect and trade information over vast distances, trading and battling included, and can further act as a survey radar to really get to know others and their opinions on certain topics. The device did its job well in the 5th generation, but its lack of adaptability outside of skins and other minor forms of customization did hurt it a bit, which is why it was likely replaced entirely by the player search system in Generation 6. Dream World. The Dream World, while it was still operational, was a browser-based online game that connected directly to the Generation 5 games and allowed players to explore a new world where they can receive rare items and even Pokémon if they dared to brave the journey into this almost magical land. For one thing, this was the only way for players to really grow berries outside of Unova because the soil there isn't quite fit for it otherwise, and in turn was the only way to get access to the many berries used to help reduce damage taken from certain types of attacks. More importantly, however, it was also the only way at the time to get access to rare Pokémon with their hidden abilities, one of the few features of Generation 5 that did manage to become a mainstay in the larger franchise over time. These Pokémon could not be shiny, but their hidden abilities and decent chance of being females that could then pass them down to future generations, not to mention their potential possession of rare moves that normally are inaccessible, made the area and the journey associated with it worth it. Just leave a Pokémon there, come back or walk with it in real time, and a lovely trip of potential goodies was sure to follow no matter what. Unfortunately, while the Dream World was a wonderful way to supplement the Generation 5 games and find rare items and Pokémon that might have otherwise been inaccessible, the system was eventually shut down and rendered inaccessible, and today merely exists as a memory of what once was. Memory Link. The Memory Link feature was unique to Black 2 and White 2 as a result of the games taking place years after the events of the original Black and White games. In essence, this feature could allow players to, with enough progression in these sequel games, see events that unfolded between the two main sets of games in Generation 5, providing context and information on just what everyone had been up to in the time gap between these two game sets. While it was a nice addition to give some context as to the changes made to the characters and locations between these games, it also is tied specifically to these games and them alone, which may explain why this gimmick never made it out of the games into subsequent generations. Unova Link and Key System. The Unova Link or Key System in Black 2 and White 2 allowed for alterations to be made directly to the games themselves in regards to the three major settings. First of all, the Key System could allow players to switch between Black City and White Forest in the game by exchanging keys with someone that had the opposite set in their game, while secondly the door that is open in Clay Tunnel could be changed to acquire the different Reggies hidden there. Most importantly of all, however, the system also allowed players to change the difficulty setting of subsequent playthroughs of the games to either make it easier or more difficult. While the difficulty setting option likely was quite fun for those that needed an extra challenge in the games, or even conversely were not very experienced and wished for an easier time, the key system didn't stick around and wasn't reproduced in further generations, possibly due to the link the system had to the Unova region and its geography specifically. The removal of options for difficulty, though, is admittedly uncertain, though given that players have become increasingly distinct in creating their own challenges in playing the games, it may have been deemed unnecessary since the fanbase of the series has been doing that job pretty well on its own. Pokémon Fusion. Pokémon Fusion is a rare type of transformation that was introduced in Black 2 and White 2 as a consequence of those games focusing on Kyurem as the primary legendary of the game. Kyurem itself in its base form is a frozen corpse of a monster in concept, as it is what's left over from the split that turned the Great Dragon Pokémon of Unova Legend into three different beings, namely Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem itself. With the aid of the DNA splicers, which themselves are actually incomplete, it is possible to take either of those first two beasts and merge them with Kyurem in order to create White Kyurem or Black Kyurem, which in turn alters Kyurem's base stats in a positive manner almost entirely and gives it access to the powerful Ice Burn and Freeze Shock attacks, which replace its signature Glaciate attack, and further gains access respectively to the Fusion Flare and Fusion Bolt attacks. This makes Kyurem's fused forms an extreme danger to deal with and strong enough to prove to be a terrifying force to face, and given it is a form that is linked to a key item and can easily be reproduced in other generations without a direct link to the Unova region itself being necessary, it is a transformation that has persisted throughout all further generations and likely will continue to do so into the future.
We'll keep right on rolling next time on the V.T.P as we hop both generations and hardware once again into the world of 3D handheld gaming. Thank you for watching this video. It brings me great joy to be able to speak to you all in the world each and every time we meet like this, to explore the many different facets of both the world of Pokemon as we know it, and the world as we live it, through every adventure we have with Pokemon by our side. If you'd like to, please subscribe, ring the bell and all that jazz, to keep yourself updated on content uploads and other materials of the like. You can also follow me on Twitter if you'd like to know right away when something new is uploaded, and my written works, from which most of this is based on, can be found on DeviantArt. Links to both can be found in the description down below. Remember that the world of Pokemon is a place full of wonder and mystery, and you never know what to expect. So, stay vigilant, keep watch, and always be prepared for the unexpected. Until next time, trainers and friends of all sorts, have a wonderful time.